Hi everyone and welcome back to my Consultants Explorer channel. I'm Charlie and I'm here to help you explore the early career years of technology consulting, how to be successful at it and how to make the most of the opportunities that it can open up for you. I spent 8.5 years at Accenture building the most incredible launchpad for my own career, and now I get to choose what I work on, whenever and wherever I want to in the world, and that's the kind of freedom I can help you find in your journey, which starts just as minded in technology consulting. Today I'm lucky enough to be recording from one of my favourite places in the world, Lake Lucerne, and I'm just hoping that the mountains in the background are going to peek out of the clouds over the course of my recording. So one of the important questions for people who are thinking of joining consulting from another career path is, would I need to take a step down if I joined? Would I be behind my peers? Are there skills that those peers have learned that I would need to step down to learn first too? And if you have already started your career in consulting, then what are those specialist consulting skills that you've learned without even thinking about it? What is it that you know that your peers in other industries don't know yet? Today I'm going to cover 4 different groups of skills that only consultants learn. First off, content expertise. Second, behavioural expertise. Third, ways of working expertise. And lastly, entrepreneurial expertise. These are the kind of skills that you learn and pick up every single day without even thinking about it, and they'll be second nature to you as a consultant. And so from that perspective, they can feel quite basic. But they're also really important, because if you don't do them, or if you do them badly, then they can cause real problems, not just for you, but also for your manager and for your clients. So first off, let's cover content expertise. These are the kinds of skills that you learn to apply in creating your everyday work content. The number one practical piece of knowledge that you gain as a consultant is repeatable methodologies that help you identify problems, determine how to solve them, and deliver a solution. These methodologies can be as broad as they are deep. Some examples might be as basic as how to run a client workshop to extract the ultimate business problem. Other examples might be as complex as coordinating hundreds of people to deliver a new piece of software that affects every single employee in your client's organisation. Knowing methodologies is one of the most important skills a consultant has, because it helps to reduce what might seem at first like insurmountable business challenges into palatable pieces, and then it helps to drive the steps to overcome it. The next important skill that consultants learn is how to create slide decks. Now, consultants get a lot of rap for how much they love producing slides, but there's a reason that clients like consultant slides. Creating a slide deck that convinces important people of something is a real art. It has to be simple enough for people to really understand and keep paying attention. But it also needs to hold enough information to really prove your point. If it's being used to influence people, then it needs to take them on a journey, often playing to both emotional and logical drivers. And of course, it needs to be visually appealing too, because it's some of your primary output. Finally, we can't not cover buzzwords in this section, can we? Even consultants joke about buzzwords. And actually, within consultancies, there's often a drive to use everyday language instead, so as not to confuse anyone. But the simple fact is, buzzwords help to shorten meetings and accelerate idea transfer within consultant groups. Words or phrases like value realization, critical path, backlog prioritization, and white space all mean something important to consultants, and to try and describe them in plain English can often take a lot more time, which can be really frustrating given the regularity with which these phrases come up. The interesting thing about buzzwords is that they generally tell you what consultants care about the most, and what their work very often involves, so it's worth paying attention to them when you can. Okay, our next section is about behaviour expertise, and it might seem a little odd to talk about how to behave as a consultant, but hopefully my explanations will help give a sense of why it's important. There are particular ways that consultants have to behave, given its dynamic as a professional service for clients. Firstly, you learn a really fine balance between offering your expertise to clients and taking direction from them. This affects every way that you interact with them. You have to figure out how hard you push your own opinions and beliefs about how to solve their problem, versus how much to accept their opinions and beliefs about what you should do. This can be quite confusing at first, because often clients hire consultants to solve problems when they don't know how to solve them themselves. But when you get started on that project, the way that you normally do things is different to how that client has envisaged that you might do it. So you just need to be respectful of the fact that this client is paying for your time and has certain expectations about what you're going to do with it. So finding the right balance is about being respectful to your client in everything you say and do, and at the same time bringing as much expertise as you can to the table so that you are as valuable as possible. Next, there is a difference between how you might behave in your own company's office versus your client's office. In your own company's office, all of your colleagues have the same constraints and incentives as you, and so doing things like training in an open space, or working on internal consulting initiatives, or having a catch-up coffee with a colleague is absolutely expected. But when you're on client side, you have to be respectful of the fact that that client is paying for your time. So doing any work that isn't directly related to your client project isn't so acceptable. That client needs to see value for their money. Your behaviour has to adapt to the location from which you're working, and for this reason, you'll learn to adapt what you do and when. Finally, consultants learn to mould into the culture of their client office with things like office hours and dress code and communication styles and platforms. You learn to adapt very quickly just because you have to. Next, let's cover ways of working expertise. Whilst the content expertise section covered lots of the what that consultants do, this section covers the how. Firstly, consulting work is inherently project-based, which means that you have to deliver something within a timeline and you have set deadlines. Often this means that you have to replan and change your approach in order to meet those deadlines. And it can also mean that you have to work under intense pressure if you have a dependency on something that's been delayed through no fault of your own. You get very used to being very much on point for something, and you learn to feel both comfortable and confident with that. Next, consulting work is generally owned by the client as soon as you produce it. The time that you spent in creating it, they paid for, and so generally they own the output and the IP of what you create. Often your client will use your work in their own internal meetings as if it's something they created themselves. So as a consultant, your mindset has to be configured to making your client look good and not ever claiming your own work. Because making your client look good is what keeps them coming back to you. And when they keep coming back to you, that's what makes you successful as a consultant. And finally, and this was an interesting one at the start of the COVID pandemic, consultants often work in lots of different places in a short space of time. In any one short space of time, they might be working in a client office and in transit and at home and in their own company's office and even in international offices. And so at the start of the pandemic, the shift to remote work was not such a big shift for consultants. But that very shift that lots of other companies experienced at that point is made up of all the same stuff that consultants just have to learn when they start working in consulting. You won't always be in person with your team, and often your team is spread across the globe anyway. And so knowing how to both meet and form relationships with people only over Teams or Zoom, especially within time zone crossover constraints, is paramount for consultants. Okay, last section, entrepreneurial expertise. It was only over the course of my later years in consulting that I realised how important entrepreneurial behaviour is within consulting firms. So here are 3 of the behaviours that I recognised. First, consultants typically need to pull together lots of different skill sets from across their firm to staff a client project. This means they learn to build a cross-functional team that balances skills in the right way to solve the specific problem at hand. Project teams are created from scratch, drawing from lots of different resource pools, much like when a founder has to grow a team for the first time and has to decide which specialisms to major on and which other required skills to hopefully find in those same specialist people. And it's not just skills that need to fit together, it's also personalities that hopefully in aggregate will create a culture of a high-performing team. Next, consultants are only useful to their clients if they have the expertise and skills that are relevant to solving the problem that the client has at hand. Client businesses evolve, and so do their problems, and so the skills required by consultants to help with those problems also evolve. Consultants need to stay constantly on top of what is going to be required for them in the near future, and they need to be able to rapidly upskill. One shift I saw during my years in consulting was the shift towards data skills, things like data analysis, data science, data engineering, because lots of our projects were becoming much more data and machine learning driven. This ability to stay on top of the market and to understand and predict industry trends is so important to entrepreneurs too, because the success of their business is dependent on whether customers continue to want to buy their product, and they may have to pivot that product to stay relevant. So being open and able to do this is crucial for both entrepreneurs and consultants alike. Finally, the most senior people in consulting typically get promoted to that level because they own a significant portion of the business themselves, driving customer sales, inspiring people to follow them, and ultimately managing revenue and cost in a way that keeps that part of the business profitable. Knowing how to drive forward a business in this way, as well as evolving a product that customers want to keep paying good money for, is a prerequisite for being a senior leader in consulting, but it's also a key entrepreneurial skill. Okay, the mountains are still feeling a little bit shy, but I hope you enjoyed all the birds and ducks that came out to play. And by the way, here's a picture of what they looked like yesterday, just in case you were wondering. So we've covered 4 groups of core consulting skills that you learn as a consultant, and that you have to pick up rapidly if you join consulting from another industry. These skills can seem so basic because you'll learn to do them without even thinking about it, but it is important to recognise them as skills. If you're already working in consulting, then it's great to reflect on what you might have learned without even thinking about it, especially if those skills might be valuable for other potential reasons. And if you're considering joining consulting from another industry, but you've been worried about taking a step down to make that transition, then maybe it's not such a bad thing. Maybe it's a good thing to have a bit more time to learn some of these skills. So I hope that's been helpful for you. Do let me know by liking the video, and definitely subscribe to my channel if you want to see what I post next. Social media links are below if you like those, and if you have any questions, then use the comments here and I will do my best to answer absolutely everything. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day, and I wish you all the best with your exploring.